With the Wall Street Journal. We have an incredible panel here. Craig Newman, the founder of Craigslist and Craig Connects. James Benedict, managing director at Cavendish Global, founding advisory board member of Women's Investment Network. And Mike Greenstein, global alternative asset management leader with PricewaterhouseCoopers. So we are thrilled to have everyone here. Now, the title of this panel is Teaching Men to Invest in Women-Owned Businesses. So as you can see, our panel has a few more men than in the previous panels. I want to start with this education. Where should this education begin, and what should it entail? Mike, let me start with you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Greenstein, and maybe before I answer that, I was texting my daughter, who happens to be studying. She's 20 in London, reminding her or telling her that I was going to speak today and asking her to wish me some luck. And her response was, "Why are you speaking? You're neither a woman nor an entrepreneur." Where does it start? It starts with support from home. That's where it starts. So why am I here? So I'm a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I'm going to emphasize the word partner. So I take that word very seriously, both at work as a partner to my colleagues, both men and women partners, as well as the young people that work with us. I'm a partner, I hope. My wife's not here to say otherwise, at home. And I'm a partner culturally in the community in support of women. And PricewaterhouseCoopers is a global supporter of He for She campaign. And that is, we've made a commitment to have 80,000 of our men support He for She, and we are well on our way with 10,000 men who have already signed up for it. So that's why I'm here.
Very exciting. So, and Craig, can you weigh in on what we were talking about earlier on how you are hoping to sort of disrupt?
The idea is to create a new normal, eventually, where people, are going to treat others like they want to be treated, which applies to gender equity, which applies to investing. That's the goal. In the here and now, I was here last week sponsoring the most recent challenge of the women's, most recent round of the Women's Startup Challenge, meaning 10 women-run startups pitching to VCs and then coming away with a check. The idea is to do things in the here and now which are real, which really help out, with the intention in the long run of creating this new normal. This is not my strength necessarily, because I really am an old school nerd. And even now I'm only simulating social skills. But that's not as much of a joke as you may be thinking. But the idea is to do real stuff in the here and now with an eye towards the long run.
And Jen, as the first female professional football player, you are very well, you're very familiar with schooling men in what women can do. So what is it important to impart?
Well, first, I wasn't the first female professional football player. I played 14 years in women's professional football. And though it's not acknowledged, I would say the level of professionalism of all those ladies really deserves it. I was, however, the first woman to play running back in men's professional football, then to coach the same team the next year, and then to coach in the NFL. So I think to really show it, you have to, like he said, I love that, change what is the new normal. I look forward to a time when we're not celebrating those firsts anymore. I know for me, being in New York, a story comes to mind, and it was from one of my friends who is a legendary New York Giants linebacker, Jesse Armstead. And it was after I had played with the men, and he called me and he said, "I'm so proud of you." And I was like, "What are you talking about, Jesse?" And he said, "I was literally sitting with a bunch of the guys from the New York Giants last night, and we were at a motocross event, and one of the guys said, 'Man, that's tough. No woman could do that.' And he said, and another guy looked at him and he said, I'm beginning to think that women can do anything. Did you hear about that girl playing football with men? And I think often we, especially at events like this, we think of inspiring young girls, and that's what I'm all about. But when women take on different roles with men, it not only gives girls a new place to look, but it also gives men a new way to look at women.
On investing in women's businesses. Tell us your experience.
Yeah, so thank you, and well said. How does this work?
I think you press the button.
We need Craig.
Yeah, there you go.
Is it working? I'm not from the technology sector. No, so I'm very fortunate. I get to work with a global community of families of substantial means. We're talking liquid positions in the billions of dollars, and they want to, and we are investing their financial and relational assets in a way that drives superior financial and social returns. And the people I work with get that investing in women is the biggest financial and social arbitrage in history. So I'm really fortunate. I get to work with enlightened people, and our objective is to change pattern recognition through success stories, right? So we're going to launch a $500 million regenerative medicine fund. The CEO of that fund will be a woman. Why? Hands down, the best person to do it. And, you know, I think about my daughter, think about your daughter. You know, when my daughter, who's 12, goes in to raise money for her startup, it's going to be a qualitatively different conversation. And hopefully, you know, all of us around here will be catalysts for creating the success stories that enable people to see differently.
Can I comment on that? I think one of the, I learned the lesson here. Just you know, what it reminds me of is the notion of taking care of each other's, and it's you know, this expression, it takes a village, and I think it's certainly true, and there's a variation on the golden rule that I think that men in particular need to follow, which is that we should treat the women that we work with, the young women or peers, in a way that we'd want other men to treat our own daughters or our sisters or our nieces. My daughter's 20, I have other children, I have nieces that are all working, and I start to see the young women who work in our office in a similar way. And as you get older, you start to have that perspective, and I think that's one of the most impactful things we can do, is to make sure that we treat others. Craig said it earlier. We treat others like we'd want others to treat our own daughters.
Yes, they say that some of the best feminists are fathers with daughters. So it's a wonderful lesson. But I also want to know what it is that we should be teaching our sons, not only what we should be outright teaching them, but also perhaps what we should be showing them as you learn by example. Craig, would you like to comment?
Lacking children, but now having, I think it just changed to 21 nephews and nieces. The deal is to practice what you preach, to engage in investing and helping out people in a number of groups, to just do it, and then to do so relentlessly, and to talk about it a lot, doing public engagement largely through social media. So the deal is to do that and more. I'm also working with the Global Fund for Women back home in San Francisco, which has actually convened a group specifically for this. As for kids more specifically, the problem may be being solved right there already in ways that I don't really understand, because I never really was young. And the deal among millennials, there seems to be a lot more gender and ethnic equity than people of my advanced years realize. The deal is that people may be treating each other like they want to be treated already, and given another 20 years, things may be very different, because millennials may already have different attitudes. Until then, again, the message is to practice what one preaches. There's also stuff like, I'm involved with Poynter Institute, which is about journalism education. There's a women's leadership thing going on right now, which I'm part of. And again, practice what you preach.
I want to briefly mention some recent research out of MIT that took a look at gender bias in the industry. It conducted a controlled experiment in which the same business plan was narrated over the phone, first by a male voice and then by a female voice. The male voiced plan was chosen 68% of the time, which indicates that there is a bias that is so deep as to be almost unconscious. So how do we help others identify this bias? James?
God, I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer that one. I'm not, because I always focus on the solution, right? And I go back to just creating examples that work, right? My world is private equity, so we show how investing in a woman business actually generates better returns. And guess what? People are focused on the what versus the who. So I don't know.
Sure. I mean, there's no doubt that bias exists, and it comes in all different shapes and sizes. And so what I would say, first and foremost, it's awareness. It's awareness on the part of the potential investor, and it's awareness on the part of the potential investee. We know that women attribute success to others and failure to themselves, and men are the opposite. We know that women sometimes allow themselves or are interrupted and don't interrupt others. And you need to be aware of what those tendencies are, and men need to be aware of what those tendencies are. So some of the things at PwC that we do is we do training on that. We have a course called Hidden Biases or Blind Spots, and so you watch a series of videos, and there are other ways that's exhibited, but you become aware of the things that are hidden. Maybe it's intentional from some people, unfortunately. There'll always be a contingent like that, but for most people, I think it's hidden. And we have another course, which happens to be, it's my favorite name for a course, it's White Men and Diversity. So I got like 5 claps for that. And they were a little hesitant claps, but the point is that there's an expression and a metaphor that sometimes we use that is that it's the seed and the soil. You need to cultivate the seed, but you need to prepare the soil. And the soil is the environment. And you're not going to change the environment, you're not going to change it by yourself. And you need to change the environment if you want that seed to grow and develop. And so I think it's important, whether or not it's a good name or not, it's important, unfortunately, to, in this country, engage white men in the discussion and make sure that they're aware of those hidden biases.
Jen, do you want to talk about your experience with the bias?
I think the biggest bias actually came beforehand. And I think sometimes with that and in that, we sell guys short on what they're capable of seeing. And I say that because so much of the dialogue prior to me coaching in the NFL was, would these guys in the NFL take coaching from a woman? And doesn't that sell them short? Because the truth is that those guys were fantastic. And they learned from me because I had knowledge, and maybe my approach was at times slightly different because I was a woman. But so many of these guys, grew up with a mom as the one who was teaching them most of the time. So we have to be careful in how we create the dialogue surrounding situations, because when we raise those questions, we're acknowledging that there's a potential problem here. And I can tell you, as somebody who coached in what should be, what is often thought of as the most macho place in the world, that these guys not only took coaching from a woman, but they thrived in that situation, and they were proud of the fact that they were a part of history and they were a part of change. And I would even add to that, the other element is those guys did great. And they're fantastic. And I will say that I love them and I'm proud of them to the ends of the earth for it, and the coaches as well. But the other part is this, and how powerful is the imagery when you're not only a young girl and you see a girl who's not half the size of most of these guys, instructing them how to be a physically dominant specimen. But also those little boys growing up who now see that a coach can come in so many forms, fashions, shapes, and sizes than to be just the traditional male coach.
James, I want to ask this next question to you because we know that globally women are now better educated than men. In this country, they control more than half of the personal wealth. And in addition to all of this, the demographics of the U.S. Shifting very rapidly. So how will a lack of investment in women and minority-owned businesses, for that matter, affect the economy in the next 20 years, do you think?
I think, as we've heard today, the opportunity to invest in other, right? Because the people who are making the investment look like some of us on the panel today. The opportunity they're missing is profound. It's an order of magnitudes of GDP. I remember, just to give you something specific, because I do a lot of work in Japan. Japan has estimated that they're losing something on the order of magnitude to 3 to 5% of GDP a year by not fully harnessing the power of women in the workforce. And that's extraordinary, right? That's just Japan. So that's one data point that speaks to the missed opportunity. But I'm optimistic because I'm seeing it change. And I think I'm hoping we're one or two success stories away from a tipping point where people say, wow, this makes a lot of sense. The next great franchise company was started by a woman. Why? Because she understood that the market, like for her product or service, just like every major market or product, every major market globally is led by women. You are the consumers. So I think we're close to changing things. But we're losing a lot in terms of GDP by not doing it.
Craig, would you like to comment?
I don't know what we're losing. And again, my focus, well, it's better to work on part of the solution. Since Kiva and Kiva Zip were already brought up today, got involved some years ago, focusing a lot on small loans for women-run businesses, very small businesses, in the West Bank. More recently, about a month or two ago, helped launch Kiva Zip in San Francisco, same focus, and I think Intuit is maybe largely based in Detroit now. I'd like to hear more about Kiva Zip in Detroit, and also in Newark, because the deal is that rather than focus on potential loss, and frankly, I've given up predicting economics completely, because it's only another way to embarrass myself, and I have no shortage of that. But Kiva programs like that, those are things that could actually mean something and get ahead. So I take a look at that, Kiva globally and Kiva Zip in the US.
I'd like to move on to a little practical advice. We know that there are a lot of young female entrepreneurs here today, and they may, in the very near future, or may have already found themselves in a room full of men pitching their idea. Unfortunately, VCs are still overwhelmingly male. So perhaps the gentleman on our panel here can give some advice to these young ladies in how they can present themselves most effectively to men.
Well, I'm not in the position of making investment capital, but I am hopefully part of in a position to help with human capital, so maybe I'll approach it from that perspective. So I often, you're often asked what advice do you have for people, and I guess I'll give two pieces of advice. And the first is look for the helpers. There are helpers out there. There are people who are advocates and helpers and want to help, and it's important to find those people and leverage them. The second piece of advice is be as strong as you are. And I often find that at work situations, some of the young women mitigate their strength. And there's one situation that really highlighted this for me. I was walking into a meeting with a colleague of mine, and I know you can't tell based on my commanding presence on the stage, but I'm a little shorter than average height, and this woman, it is a little, okay, it's not a lot, but this woman is above average height, and so we walk in like this, and we both sit down at the conference room table, and I seek out, I'll call it a good seat, and that's somewhat in the middle, and she happens to sit on the periphery. And the first thing I do, I can't do it here because of these chairs, but the first thing I often do when I go to a conference room table is I look to adjust the chair up. Okay, so I physically make myself taller at the table, and almost at the same time, this colleague lowered her chair. Okay, so we walked in like this, and then at the meeting we were like this. And because of where I sat, and maybe because of the way I felt, I had a more active role, maybe a dominant role if that's appropriate in the meeting, and she had a peripheral role. And so my advice is don't mitigate your strength. I generally think that women are stronger than they are given credit for, and men are not as strong as they appear. Okay, and that's my general advice. So if you so that means invest in women; they're underappreciated.
James, would you like to comment? Obviously, you hear a lot of pitches from female business women, no? And what works and what doesn't work?
Yeah, so I think first off, you should really do your homework and target your investors and try as best as you can up front to find the right profile of the person for you. And I wish I could say hypothetically speaking, but there's nothing worse than having toxic, delusional shareholders. I've just gone through that too many times. So try to find the people who you think will get you and do as much homework on them as possible. I think just my observation, I think women, and this connects with me, right? They pitch, I'm in private equity. I'm all about the soul, and I've learned to reprogram the way I communicate to be about the financial ROI. But I think women overemphasize kind of the social aspect of what, on average, right? The social aspect of what they do. So I would say really hit hard with the business metrics, right? Like, this is a great investment opportunity, and here's why. And then I think, look, men are simple, right? We really are. Find a way to meet us where we are. Create a connection with us. We might not understand Spanx or products that appeal to women, but find a, and I'm not sure how to figure that one. But I mean, my point is that figure out, you have a wife, you have a daughter. Meet us where we are with language that pulls us in. And then guess what? We start focusing on the what and not on the who. So.
Craig, would you like to comment?
I'm going to ask to comment on this real quick because, I'll just point something out. There's been several questions that, though it's he for she, we even fed into the bias. Because in terms of proportion, my opinion was not asked on certain questions. And, no, it's not, that's not something against you. That's telling women a very important message. When you have something to say, you have to be willing to stand up and say, hey, guess what? And I'm glad it worked that way because, ladies, there's so much more. And when you see it and you know it and you feel it, don't be afraid to say it. Okay? These guys up here are all rock stars. And it would be very easy for me to just nod my head because I found myself being captivated by everything that they said because it is all valuable. But just because somebody else is captivating, that doesn't make your voice any less valuable. Okay? And so in true coach fashion, I'm going to tell you guys how I made it with the boys, okay? Number one, be good at what you do. If you want to be in the men's club or the boys' club or play with the boys or coach them, you have to be good. Number one, okay? I'm going to put that into practical terms. When I got to the NFL, I knew I was doing pretty well because the guys were like, oh man, coach, we watched your highlight reel. You were a heck of a ball player. Okay, so number one, I got credibility, right? I had street cred. Good thing. Number two, before that even happened, I had a great guy bring me in. Bruce Arians is a phenomenal coach. He has a phenomenal reputation. He was willing to bet on me. Okay, so that also spoke to credibility because he was leveraging me through his reputation and giving me a hand up. Okay, and that was huge. And I don't ever want to leave that because without him and him saying to the coaches, this girl's worth it, to the guys, I'm bringing this person in, they probably wouldn't have looked up my highlight reels and I wouldn't have had a chance to have that credibility. Okay? Number three, don't be afraid to get in the mix, right? There were some guys who didn't know how much I would know about football. I even kind of gosh, this is the NFL. Will I be able to tell them something? And that lasted about 2.2 seconds until I saw something wrong. I was like, hey, you're underside. If you attack just a little bit further to the outside, don't try and big body him, get lower, dip and rip outside his outside shoulder, you would have had a sack. And he was like, all right, coach. And they loved it. And it was like they got a hit of knowledge. And it was like, all right, coach, that really worked. What else you got? So that was the other one. And the last thing I would say is just because you're a woman, you don't have to change the locker room culture. Meaning, I let the boys be boys. And in fact, I gave it back to the boys better than they gave it to me at times. But there were those moments where they'd be like, oh, no. Like I remember one of the coaches looked at me and he said, yes, ma'am. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I looked at him and I said, I am never going to get mad at you for good home training. Okay? Your mom was clearly an amazing woman because you have great manners. I said, you can call me ma'am. You can call me coach. And yes, I am a doctor, so you can call me doctor. Just don't call me a B word. And we were good.
All right, Craig, do you want to give some advice to women? After that, you want to follow that up?
VCs in particular, they're not patient people. They talk about an elevator pitch where you have to get to the point about what you're doing in about 45 seconds. That's for real, and they'll judge you on that just because they're looking for people who can actually get to the point. Beyond that, seriously, don't underestimate how clueless human males can be. That was illustrated at this Women's Startup Challenge. The winner had to do with embeddable biosensors in clothing, which was pretty good. But the most revealing one for me was the home pregnancy test. It was a flushable, disposable version, and I had never thought about the privacy implications of something like that before. There's many other areas where we can be clueless, but I think I'll reserve those to myself.
I want to ask then, how much of a problem do you think it is that VCs are still overwhelmingly male? This will be the last question because we're running out of time. Will it change when there are more female VCs? And Jen, you can start.
There you go. Lesson learned, right? Sometimes you have to be willing to take the lead. I think it can be a problem or it can be an opportunity. Ladies, if you know that the VCs are overwhelmingly male, then take notes and learn how to talk to men. Okay, don't make it an excuse that there are not enough female VCs. You have to have an immediate solution and a long-term goal. Okay, long-term, do we need more women VCs? Absolutely. But how do we get more women VCs? We get more female businesses funded now, and we let them make enough money to then reinvest back in women.
James, do you want to follow that?
Well said. The only thing I might add to that is that when we speak about seeking funding, we always talk about institutional investors like venture capital firms. There's a growing global ecosystem of people. You've heard the term family offices, but it's family office. It's fundamentally wealthy people who are investing directly. And it's harder to find them, but if you can find them, it is on average a lower cost of capital. And if you find the right person, it's exponentially more accretive because people are investing usually because they believe in you, they believe in your vision, and they're willing to work with you in a way that's make an investment in you beyond the financial that can be pretty powerful. So I just encourage you to look not just at VCs, but there's a whole other universe.
All right, I just got the word that we need to stop. So thank you so much to our panel. It was great having you guys today. Thank you. Thank you.